Paul read it, he wanted to play David. And Josh was sort of like, well, if that's what Paul wants, then I guess I'm Lionel. I sort of woke up one day, I called Josh first, and I was like, I think it's the other way around. Of course, Paul likes to sing more than Josh does.
I had probably never been as happy as I was when collecting songs.
I wanted to start, if you could talk a little bit about what about this story was one that you couldn't really let go of, that really you wanted to make this project and felt really committed to.
I don't know if this is very common for other directors, but I always try to do, not the opposite, but I try to move away from what I've made before. And my previous film at the time that I read the short story was about the army in South Africa during the 80s. It was about the indoctrination of white men under the apartheid government, very toxic environment, and reading History of Sound was like this release of all of that, this beautiful romance, this wisdom, this just beautiful feeling in a short story. And so it felt like the right palate cleanser to that film.
What were your initial conversations with Ben Shattuck, who wrote the story, you co-wrote the screenplay with him, about what this adaptation would look like and what your collaboration would look like?
It was really just to maintain the essence of what you felt in the short story. The short story very much is the last scene of the film, where you have the older Lionel reflecting and encountering the recording. And it just seemed like a really beautiful coda to a life. And I like to read things and kind of put myself in those situations. And I'd learned this on my previous film, Living, which I developed at the same time as History of Sound. The prospect of making a film about death in that situation, I like the idea that it sort of makes me exist in some way very real, and I like the idea that in this film I had to wonder how would I live my life if there was this echo from the past.
With this casting, if I have it correct, they were attached kind of interchangeably between Lionel and David for many years. So I guess to start, like, what was just attractive to you about them as actors, and then how did you eventually decide who would play who?
Yeah, because we had sort of met as people who wanted to work together no matter what. Paul was actually going to be in my previous film, so there was always this interest in finding the material, and this came along, and when Paul read it, he wanted to play David, and Josh was sort of like, well, if that's what Paul wants, then I guess I'm Lionel. I sort of woke up one day, I called Josh first, and I was like, I think it's the other way around. Also because I sort of noticed their dynamic as friends, I could sort of sense that Paul had this great admiration for Josh. He was an actor that he greatly admired, and Josh was one of the first people Paul ever met when Normal People came out. And I felt like there was a kind of appropriate dynamic between them. And of course, Paul likes to sing more than Josh does.
That helps. What was your relationship to these folk songs, which this movie excavates? They're beautiful songs. And I know Ben Shattuck had a relationship to them when he wrote the story. But given that they are such a big part of this movie, how did you kind of come to learn about them yourself and work them in?
It was that great journey that I love doing as a filmmaker. I'm from South Africa, so whenever you get offered a movie in another country, in another time in history, there's the deep dive. And Ben was definitely my guide. He had this music in his childhood, and there was a Spotify playlist that I would share with the actors. A lot of this music is about, missed connections, or there was one we almost used, which about two people looking for each other in the snowstorm, and then they both kind of die, but meters apart. I loved those kinds of dramatic musical narratives that you don't really have in contemporary pop music.
Yeah.
And so these songs have like a 3-act structure, and so all of these songs are those sort of missed love connections.
What kind of work did he do, Paul, that is on, I suppose, getting that sound right, that's such a specific, to your point, kind of approach to these songs, and even just the first time we hear him sing, it's so beautiful and surprising, I think.
I mean, actors love a challenge. So, he just worked really hard. I think the accent was also like this real challenge for him because he's Irish. But there was just a lot of work put in, just loads and loads of time. I remember the real anxiety was Josh having to play this piano piece, and he kept telling us he's never going to get it right. And then, of course, the day that he does it perfectly, which is, brilliant but annoying.
The first, I suppose, act of this film is this beautiful romance between the two of them. Much has been made, I would say, of the fact that there aren't a lot of sex scenes in this movie. I think that's to the movie's credit. But walk us through the way you wanted to depict this romance and where you wanted to show a little bit more restraint and where you wanted to really go, I suppose, all in.
Yeah, it's an interesting question because when we announced the film and the casting of the film, the sort of internet had its reaction to the concept of Paul and Josh in a movie like this. And then there was kind of this sort of like anticipation of I think blue is the warmest color, to be honest. I think I think that's where everyone was going. And there's an
I think
irony.
you're wrong.
And the other irony is that the short story has been on the internet for 7 years. So anyone who really wanted to know what was going to be in the history of sound could have just read it. It's not the main catalyst. They have a desire for each other. They have an attraction to each other, but it's such a loaded attraction. That level of attraction, that like level of like, wow, I think is enough to kind of galvanize this deep sense of yearning towards somebody. It wasn't like there was an active choice to like no sex scenes. I mean, we do technically have sex scenes, but it just wasn't. I don't know. It just didn't feel right. And to be fair, before I made History of Sound, I was making a TV show in England set in the 17th century with Julianne Moore and Nicholas Galitzine, and I kept shooting orgies in that TV show. There were so many orgies and so many sex scenes, so I was kind of fatigued, to be honest.
Yeah. There's that do the opposite of what you've done before coming back again. From there, the movie really opens up and you take Lionel to Europe, and it feels like the whole world of the film gets so much bigger. I know that was really important for you. What were the logistics, I suppose, of getting the production to get to that point, and also why was it important to you to see him go all the way across the world?
It's a sort of brilliant part of the writing where, Lionel's life is the imagination of David. David tells him what to do. David gives him the kind of context, the vision, almost the confidence to live a life. And so he literally lives that life as David imagines it for him. And it was really important for us to be able to show that. And a movie like this is really hard to have 3 different countries of shooting. It's a very ambitious film. 20 years ago, a movie like this would have had, a $35 million budget. And it's very hard to make dramatic work that wants to use landscape or wants to be, a sweeping kind of film. We have to be so much smarter as filmmakers. But unfortunately, New Jersey cannot do the Lake District. So it can do a lot of other places, but it can't do the Lake District. So we had to, and then of course, when we went to the Lake District, we just chose the most impossible location to get to, but it was worth it because it was this incredible view. And that just felt like the opportunity to breathe the film out.
Mm-hmm. What would you say was the hardest thing just in figuring this project out for you?
I mean, it was an interesting project in the fact that we wrote the screenplay in 6 months from, no draft to the draft that was shot. And so that was done in Thanksgiving 2020. The actors came on by that January. And then there was the world and the universe. And so that was interesting to me because I was defending the choice of Paul and Josh and also trying to understand like why the world is so afraid of dramatic films or certain kinds of films. And it was this kind of intention that became very much Paul, Josh and I, where we just believe in these kinds of movies. And it was really like steadfastness. And that was really rewarding in a way because I think this film very much feels like the 3 of us wanted to do something and willed it into existence through so many journeys, and we all made other things. I mean, I made a movie and a TV show, and they made like 4 or 5 films each. So it's just been this long haul.
Yeah. Oliver Hermanus, thank you so much. Thank you all for coming out tonight.
Thank you.